Hey there, and welcome back to the Complicated Kids podcast. I'm your host, Gabrielle Nicolay, and today I'm joined by Jennifer Glacel. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I am so happy that you are here. We are going to talk about lots of things in the realm of this question. As I was preparing to, and I'm going to have you introduce yourself in a second, but as we were kind of saying, what should we talk about today? I asked you a question, and I'll tell the people what the question was, and then we can talk about it a little bit if we want to. But the question was, what would you like to talk about all day long for free with both hands tied behind your back? Which, if somebody asked me that, I would say child development immediately to anybody, always, somewhere, everywhere. And you said, it depends on the context, which let me know that that was not the question and that we needed to change the question. And so the new question was, what do you wish other professionals knew that they don't already know? And so with that question kind of overarching, please tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you do and that kind of thing.
Okay, well, I am Jennifer Glacel, and Jen or Jennifer is fine. I am a psychotherapist. I am a clinical social worker. I'm a registered play therapist, which means I have the training and supervision to work with young children. And I am a private practice owner in Falls Church, Virginia. My practice, Seven Corners Psychotherapy, focuses on play therapy, working with kids as young as 3 through the lifespan. We also work with adults using a non-directive, child-centered approach. And we have a heavy influence in our practice on being neurodiversity affirming, working with autistic folks, and being gender affirming, given the high overlap in those populations. So that's where our focus has been clinically.
I'm going to do a podcast on the overlap between, yes, neurodiversity and gender diversity. That is
Yes.
a really good topic for another
It's
day.
important. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. In the past couple years, my own focus professionally has been on consultation, training, and supervision of other therapists. I am autistic. I have come to this understanding about myself later in life, and part of getting to that point was unlearning all the things I thought I knew and relearning. And in that process, I thought, it's important that I help others understand these things that I now understand. It's important that I use the reputation I already have as a play therapist in the field to say, oh, and this is also me, and these are things that we have wrong and we need to think about a little bit differently. And so that's been my focus.
It gets really interesting, right? When you're in the group and then you think,
Yes.
oh, but I'm in the therapist group. I'm also in the quote unquote patient group,
Absolutely.
client group. And it does start to, what I'm hearing you say is it starts to shift your perspective very, very quickly.
Absolutely.
And so one of the things that you said when I sort of asked this global question, what do you wish other professionals knew? You started to talk about internalized ableism. And I think we need to define our terms. So what is ableism? What does it mean to have internalized it, and go from there?
So ableism is prejudice against those who are disabled in some way, whether it's mentally disabled, physically, whatever the disability is. And the disability can either be that something about a person doesn't work as expected, or something about a person doesn't work in the environment. And so there are two kinds of disability: the medical model, which is the internal to the person, and then the social model, which is fit with environment and culture. And so ableism is, I'm losing the word, prejudice, I'll use it again, against those who are disabled in some way. Internalized ableism are those beliefs that we have, usually unconscious, about our own disabilities, whether they are actual disabilities or whether they are, this also can meet, where people just don't meet the expectations, but they feel like they should. And that links into these internalized ableism that we all have, because our culture is a very ableist culture. We believe people should be a certain way, walk a certain way, walk in the first place, think a certain way, and our society is set up for that. So we come to this very naturally.
It's so, there's so much, oh my gosh, my brain is in 100 different directions. It is true that most people are, it's a horrible term, able, if we're going to just like be able versus disabled, okay, fine. Able in the way that we expect people. In other words, most people's bodies and brains comport with expectations, and most people's bodies and brains comport with the environment in which they find themselves, or the environment is constructed in such a way that it's not noxious or harmful. This is arguable too, right?
Yes.
I'm thinking
Yes.
about a shopping mall. Shopping malls come up a lot in this kind of conversation, right? Which is, so shopping malls, do you have a perspective on shopping malls? We just took a sharp right turn, but
Oh,
it's
I
really
mean,
relevant.
yes. Yeah, for me, I don't, they're nightmares.
Yeah.
They're sensory nightmares, right? They're loud, they're bright, there's so many different things that you have to pick up. There are so many different choices that you have to make. If you haven't been there before, then it's figuring out where things are. There's often multiple levels. There's often multiple steps between one end and the other. I mean, they can be difficult places to be. On the other hand, there's often elevators and they're inside, so you're protected from weather. So there are actually a lot of benefits to shopping malls as well. So it's not all good, all bad.
Yeah, well, that's interesting too, right? For me, it's the smells in a shopping and the music. So I'm particularly sensitive to sound and smell, also touch, but and you wonder why my daughter was diagnosed with a sensory processing disorder early in life. But it is that environment, most people can hang with that environment. They can adjust, even if it's not pleasant for them, they can sort of override their internal preferences. And I think for me anyway, and you can correct me anytime, there is a group of people that we would probably call neurodivergent or neurodiverse. Some of them are very disabled, some of them are not, who just can't. They cannot override their internal signals in order to be in the environment in which they find themselves. And of course, if you're physically disabled, you cannot get out of your wheelchair and walk up the stairs. Like, we seem to have understood that pretty well.
Right. Right. Well, and a couple of things I'm going to do a language check-in, because a person cannot be neurodiverse.
Oh, thank you. I always get it wrong.
It's hard. And there are other areas in life that this is used differently. But when we think about diversity, it's all of the differences. And so a person can be neurodivergent, but not neurodiverse. A group of autistic people is probably not neurodiverse, right?
I don't understand. Say more.
So if you have a group of autistic people, their nervous systems are all more or less the same, which means they're not diverse. There's just one kind of nervous system in the group.
Oh, that's super interesting. Is there? Because I have also heard, and this is where you and I are gonna have done, probably by the time this airs, a panel together where we're going to be talking about all of this too. I have heard, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person.
Also true.
Okay.
Yes, I love that phrase. I use it frequently. So also true. But if we're thinking about big, the kind of the overarching things, right, that we do group people into, well, these all folks have an autistic nervous system, and that can mean lots and lots of different things, but they're all autistic nervous systems. This group over here, they're ADHD, right? Their brains and nervous systems we categorize in this way. You know, this group over here is neuronormative. They're not falling into, they're probably not neurotypical. Does that exist? I'm not so sure. But any one of those groups is not in and of itself diverse.
That is fascinating.
When you mix them together, that's when you get the diversity.
And that's when you get the good stuff.
Right, yes. And so a group of autistic people are neurodivergent. One autistic person is neurodivergent, But so it's confusing and it's difficult. But this is part of my autistic brain in that I get very, very specific about vocabulary.
This is why you are the perfect person to talk to about this.
Excellent.
So thank you.
And because I said that, I lost the rest of.
That's okay, because we were talking about shopping malls, and and I think there are going to be people listening to this, and I want to acknowledge them too, who are like, what do you mean a shopping mall is a horrible place? Okay.
Right.
And if
Yes.
that's true for you, that's okay too. Like, nobody is shaming anybody about shopping malls. And I think this is a problem with humans generally. It's a problem in the political realm. It's a problem in the disability world. It's a problem in race, certainly, where we want to use the same tools in the opposite direction, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer does not exist on either side of any spectrum. The answer exists in the messy middle, I think. Go ahead. You've got
Yeah, it's this idea of if we can understand that everybody is right about themselves and give everybody grace to have their own needs met, and when that becomes a problem is when we have competing needs, right? And one person needs things loud and one person needs things quiet, and that's where we just have to figure that out. But if we do that with grace and respect, that everybody knows themselves the best and everybody knows what they need, and we can trust each other in that, that's when we get community and we get connection.
How does this work for children who are in possession of their nervous systems, in full possession of their temperaments, and not yet in full possession of their adult brain, number one, and certainly not in full control of their environment? How does what you're saying apply when we're thinking about children?
It puts more pressure on the adults in their world to take care of themselves, the adult nervous system, to manage that so that they can be the external regulator, the external nervous system for the child, so that the adult can see the environment isn't working, what changes can I make? It puts more responsibility on one person, and that's not usually how our society works. We actually put a lot of responsibility on children. We actually put more responsibility on children than we do on an adult.
Yeah, because they have a lot less control.
Right. If the child yells out in the middle of the classroom, they're sent to the principal's office, they'll get in trouble. If the teacher gets overwhelmed and yells at the class, everyone thinks that teacher is doing a great job. So, right? But wait a second. And so it's about changing the expectations, the ideas that we were raised with, and beginning to see children as, even though they don't have their full adult brains, they're still autonomous people with their own needs and wants that are valid.
Say that again.
Children are still full people, autonomous people with their own valid needs and wants, and who know what they need in many ways. They might not know how to communicate it in a calm manner that we would like somebody to say something with mouth words. But if we pay attention, they're telling us.
This is at the heart of, this is why you and I like each other, first of all. Because, like, if you haven't understood that, then you're missing all the signals and all the communication, because it is so rich. Children's communication, I'm going to cry thinking about it, is so rich and like clear if you can tune in. And it's very hard for lots of adults to tune in because of what has happened to them in the past, or because of their own internalized whatevers about children, for that matter, about ableism, about any of it, about what it means to be a parent or an adult. And all of those things that I just said they're sort of extra lenses, like the funhouse mirrors that get put between us and a child. And the more we can take those off, then we can establish a true connection with a
Absolutely.
child. And then actually what happens, the ironic part of this is when you do that, then you get actual mouth words that you wanted to hear in the first place. Often, not always, but often.
Most of the time, or you get it from a different source because you know that they're going to have a moment when the mouth words don't come, and so you hand them your phone and they can text it to you
I love it.
because you're open to, I'm here, I'm listening to you.
Mm. There's a little boy that am seeing right now who is really on my mind a lot because he is a very open soul with whom I made an instant connection, which is often the case, which I'm sure is the case for you. And it's he's verbal, he talks, but this connection is completely unspoken.
Mhm.
Um, and there are looks and there are gestures and there are leanings in and softness on the face. Um, and 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 it is such a it's such a nervous system like bath for me.
Mhm.
And I love that you have been talking about nervous systems. Can you say a little bit more about? I have some ideas, but I want you to tell the good people,
Yes,
why do you use that term?
I do, because that's really what autism is. Autism, we think about autism, we've been taught about autism as external behaviors. What it really is a nervous system that works differently than expected. Often various senses, right? And it goes, your nervous system goes all throughout your body. It's not just the brain, it's everywhere. It's made up of all the senses, more than just the five, right? There are at least eight, even more, if we really start going down that road. And it's made up of these senses that are taking in more information than expected and are taking it in a spiky way. So some are taking in more and some are taking in less. And one that takes in more at one point is going to be taking in less at another point. It's unpredictable in this way. And that's what autism is. And what we see are the result of the nervous system being harder to keep regulated, and the trauma that has been acted because the nervous system works differently.
Okay. So this is, and this is how I explain it to parents, and you can absolutely jump in here. Basically, many autistic people, in my experience, and you can tell me if I'm right, have a brain that perceives danger and threat in what we would consider, what neuronormative people would consider a normal, regular environment. And then, by the way, people are asking them to do things that they don't know how to do. And by the way, the socks feel really terrible. And by the way, I didn't get my favorite cereal because my mom brought the off label instead of the brand. And then, by the way, I probably have some food sensitivities. And my gut's all messed up and I have a headache, but I don't know how to tell anybody this. And so it looks like the environment is completely fine, but it's not.
Mhm.
And so now we're in this constant state of stress. And that's what's causing the trauma. There's no, right. And you will know this better than me, but trauma is not what happens to you. It's how you responded to what happened to you. And so
Mhm.
what's happening to these kids and is like kind of a persistent level of low level trauma. If there, and sometimes there is a big traumatic event.
Right, it doesn't rule that out, but there is a consistent low level trauma, and it's a couple things. One is the sensory environment, right? And uh, some autistic people do hear, right, what sounds like a um, acceptable volume level for one person is going to, for another person, actually sound like someone is screaming in their ear. What feels like a pleasant pressure handshake to one person is going to feel to someone else like their hand is being ripped off. These are actual measurable things. And so you have that happening, right? If somebody screams in your ear all day long, you're going to complain about it. You're going to be upset. You're going to have a headache. You're going to need to be quiet, be in quiet. But for folks who have a more typical nervous system, they're not experiencing it as screaming, right? So first of all, somebody's being screamed at, to continue with this example, and then they're being told no one's screaming at you. And so there is a constant and persistent invalidation of their own body experience. And when you get that day after day, moment after moment, you think you're wrong. Everybody around me is saying that no one's screaming. I must be wrong, which leads to distrust of self.
Which then
And,
leads to,
and so this is then, right? This is traumatic. And it leads to being constantly dysregulated because you are being screamed at all the time. And so when you're being screamed at and somebody says, "Can you put your shoes on?" Nobody
nope,
responds well to that.
no, I cannot put my shoes on. And now I will scream to block out the screaming and to
Yes,
avoid being asked to do this one thing that has broken the camel's back.
right.
Okay, now, as you were talking, and I'm sure as I was talking as well, if you're if you're still here and listening, you are probably feeling some anxiety because lots of people who listen to the show are parents of these types of kids. And so hopefully, number one, they will have heard or heard something that resonates in terms of like, oh my gosh, yes, could this be happening for my child? Okay, but now, now the adult is like, oh no, what can I do? How do I make this better, not worse? What do you tell parents?
So the first thing is to give yourself the grace that you have done the best thing that you can with the information you have had up till now.
Yes.
Because we have all been taught, right? My own journey has been one of unlearning what autism is, to the point that I didn't know I was autistic because it didn't resonate at all. It wasn't until I started listening to people's internal experience of their lives and I kept going, oh, wait, that's me. But I experienced the world that way. Oh, I'm not broken. I'm not wrong. I'm autistic, right? But before I knew that, I did the best I could with what I had.
Mm.
And so that's the first, is let's all forgive ourselves because we all live in this world that's giving us different information. The next thing is to listen to the voices of people who have a similar nervous system as your child. So if you have an autistic child, listen to other autistic folks because they've been through it, they've figured it out, and they have really good information, right? If your child is sound sensitive, somebody, I promise you, has researched 10 different ways to manage sound, and you're going to get some really good ideas. There's a wonderful book, Nurturing Your Autistic Young Person, by Kathy. Hang on.
Good. She's going to get it.
Kathy Wassell, Wassell. Nurturing Your Autistic Young Person, a parent's handbook to supporting newly diagnosed teens and preteens. So it is written with a specific audience in mind, but I would argue it applies to all ages. Frankly, I think it applies to all children because while it talks specifically about autism and some very specific autism recommendations, the underlying message of the book is trust your child and do what you need to do to support them even when society is telling you differently.
Okay. Now that is maybe it's easier than ever. Maybe it's just as hard as it's ever been. But that is something that I have so much compassion and sympathy and empathy for parents right now because, and I feel like it's more because of social media. Like you can go on and see all the happy, normal people on social media who are actually not that happy and not that normal, first of all. And the pressure to conform, and again, I always say this, but we live in the Washington, D.C. area where like everybody is above average and it's like Lake Wobegon, right? All the men are strong and all the women are fabulous and
Right.
and all the children are above average. And it's like, no, your child is your child,
Mhm.
but there's a certain amount of recalibration, particularly with a diagnosis, but even without a diagnosis, because
Mhm.
there are plenty of quirky individuals who don't need a diagnosis because they are functioning. They just need some accommodating and some unconditional positive regard,
Right.
some unconditional love to be like, yeah, you're you, and that's fine. You are who you are. I feel like I miss Mr. Rogers.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, he had it right very early on in our, current time, overall time period. He
Yeah.
had it right because that is it, right? If we begin to look at everyone and say, okay, what do you need to reach your goals? Then we actually, not only do we take care of the autistic kids, we take care of everybody else too. It's a common discussion in the disability community. So many disability aids, right, become just helpful to everybody. If we centered those who need more supports, if we center the most marginalized, everybody else gets supported.
I mean, I feel like there's a very long tradition in human history of that goes kind of one way and then the other way. And
Yes. Yes.
um,
Yeah.
this is a very big conversation and topic. And so we have talked about a couple of key themes. One is nervous systems. Another one is co-regulation, meaning leveraging you, the adult's nervous system on behalf of a child.
Mhm.
Is there one thing a parent listening, even a clinician listening, can do that takes one step in a direction toward affirming their child's, their client's lived experience?
Believe what people tell you.
Say that again.
Just believe what people tell you. If someone says, this is my experience, believe them. Just say okay and go from there. And sometimes people do get it wrong, but they'll figure that out. They don't need to be told. And I would much rather have everybody be able to trust themselves and then make mistakes, which then they can figure out their way through, than not trust themselves and the mistakes become much bigger. The
When
other
people,
thing I think is important is actually to, as a parent, as a clinician, trust yourself. It's hard to trust somebody else if you don't trust yourself. And all of us were children once who often were not listened to, were not trusted. Not because anybody had ill intention, but because that's the culture we live in. We live in a very, you know, nope, you don't know well enough. You're not old enough. And so to learn how to trust yourself, learn how your nervous system works, learn what you need,
when I
learn how
told,
you,
sorry, when I
no,
told
it's
my
okay.
therapists at a meeting, this was years ago, and we continue to have these conversations. When I told them that I actually don't care about the techniques that they use in speech therapy, really what I care about is whether they're connecting with their client. And this is something that's been well studied in the psychotherapy literature. And
Mm-hmm.
like there are maybe one or two people who are studying this in speech language pathology, which is shocking. That really all I cared about was the connection, because when kids feel safe and seen, and Dan Siegel says this beautifully in
Mm-hmm.
all of his books, they will do what you ask them to do, and you will know what it is that you want to ask them to do,
Yes.
because they're going to be signaling to you that they're ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
And but the looks on their faces the first time I told them this, they just about melted. A couple of them cried because nobody had ever told them that that was okay to do.
Right.
And part of the reason they come to work for me in the first place is because this is the way we do things around here, right? But parents too. When I have told parents, you don't have to like read 2 books before bed if your kid hates them, right? Because we have this thing like good parents read to their children before bed.
Right.
Good parents fill in the blank. Right? Permission not to be a good parent, to throw away the rule book and just to watch them go,
yes,
okay. And now you're in touch with yourself and you've taken off your own filters and now you can see Junior way more clearly.
Yes. Yeah. And that's hard, right? Because first of all, we're taught to do something differently and the messages we get are differently. And the other thing is that when we are, taught to do something, it's often with we'll do that to get to this end, right? Trust your child so that then they'll do what you want them to do. Trust yourself so that then your family will have the perfect, holiday photo card. And that's the other piece of letting go of that and being kind of excited about the wonder of who is this person going to be? Who am I going to be, unfettered by the expectations that have been put on me? And so we're doing these things, we're trusting ourselves, we're trusting the other person with the only goal in being that trust and that relationship.
And if that sounds scary, daunting, like you don't want to do it, and you're listening here, it's probably because one of your children or more is begging you to do this, one of your clients begging you to do this. So get some help, get a coach, get a therapist, get a mentor,
Get a
friend, start reading about nervous systems. There are any number of ways to do this so that because it doesn't have to be scary. You don't have to jump into the pool naked right now.
And you don't have to do it alone. And the other thing that I have been very focused on recently is community, because there are lots of incredible mental health therapists and speech therapists and so many professional supports in the world. And that's actually not enough because there's a lot of people struggling right now after everything we've been through recently. And what I really think, and I don't come up with this on my own, there's a wonderful woman named Martha Crawford who's doing a lot of this work, and she's in the Southwest, is the community. And if you have a friend who is on the same journey you are, then you can call them and say, I'm struggling, and they can help you co-regulate so that then you can turn and help your child. You can say, I need an hour alone, and you will have people who can come in. And is it okay if I talk about my new organization?
Please, I was just going to ask you because
Yes.
we're going to wrap here in a second. And yes, perfect timing.
And this is partly why I have co-founded an organization that we're calling WING, the Washington Interdisciplinary Neurodiversity Group. And we came up with the words to meet the acronym. Because we need community, we need places that center, and my lane is autism, and so we're starting with centering the autistic person, but the neurodivergent in general, your young neurodivergent trans person, right? This is the person we want to center, because then again, everybody else will find their space. And we want to build connections in our community right here in Northern Virginia, in DC, and in Maryland, so that it's not just all on the professionals, that people have lots of layers of support. And so that's what I hope that we can fill in some of those gaps with this new organization. We'll see.
And the website is now live. Give us the website.
Yes, it's wing-dmv.com.
Perfect. And people can go check that out.
Yes.
If people want to know more about your practice, where do they go?
The practice is called Seven Corners Psychotherapy. So the website is sevencornerspsychotherapy.com, all spelled out. And there's information there on me, all the therapists in my practice, and the supervision and trainings that I do. More information can be found there.
Jennifer Glacel, thank you for
You're
being
welcome.
here.
I have enjoyed this so much.
Me too. Take care.
Thanks.